wasn't a Lamar. She was a Lauren, and she was a mommy.
My name's Johnny2000, and after spending over $100,000 on 8 to 10 years of college for executive producing and writing TV, I produced over 5 multi-year web series, producing over 100 episodes of original content, all in exchange for a development year at Nickelodeon, where I got to sell a TV movie and wait for a year as it got canceled. And the most success I've found since then is a YouTube channel only talking about the shows I used to grow up watching, so you guys are gonna have to join me on that. But today I wanted to use my expertise to actually dive into the coolest part of TV show development.
Babies don't get birth, it comes out somewhere else.
Oh boy.
So what's a production Bible? First off, it goes by a couple of different names. Different networks call them different things based on how they develop the show. Some shows start out just with a pilot, some start out just with a production Bible. Others might not have any of these documents and just go right to series. The point of this document is to communicate the spirit of the show within words and pictures, so that way any of the writers on the staff can have the consistent voice that the main brain power has. You know how with SpongeBob we say the first 3 seasons are good, but then after that it's bad? That's because Steven Hillenburg was at the helm of the first 3 seasons, but then wasn't on it afterward, making this brain power almost so important to the product that it couldn't survive without it. But when done right, you have a communicative document that actually makes everything consistent. Usually it consists of the premise and format, like how the show is structured and what it's about. Then we have the character biographies, which is a little bit of a deep dive on what these people mean to the story and to each other, and just like what their quirks are, like what makes them a flawed character, what makes their goals important, a lot of the stuff you actually go into a show wanting to see. We got world rules and backstory, which is always important, especially for a show like Avatar: The Last Airbender, where you need to know what happened with the war, where some might actually be less important, like Camp Lazlo, for example. Like, they don't need to go into the backstory, while shows like SpongeBob or Adventure Time do have this connective tissue to it. One of the most important parts of these things are the season or episode outlines, which actually really break down the structure of what's supposed to happen in every episode, which is, to me, the core anatomy of a TV show. Tone and themes are also important because they establish how much of something is a comedy versus a horror, like Courage the Cowardly Dog. That would be an interesting take. I'm sure they prioritize the comedy, but they also have the lore. And specifically, every episode starts, goes, and ends in a very similar fashion, something that a lot of shows don't really do. If you're a cartoon, you need a lot of visual references, animated parts, like if the eyes are a certain way, you want to communicate that to the rest of the artists. And TV shows like live action wouldn't have as many of those. They would more be stories and characters and focus on that. Continuity details are also super important, because if there's any distinguishing things as an artist I want to put in my characters, I need all my artists to know that. Camp Lazlo, out of all shows, has one of the most creative Bibles. It starts out looking like a handbook for a Bean Scout, which is really creative because the whole show is centered around being a Bean Scout. And on the front it says a camper's updated field guide to drawing and producing Cartoon Network's Camp Lazlo, which is actually really cute. And this was produced in June 7th of 2004, and the show didn't even air till July of 2005. So this is like super in advance because of how long it takes cartoons to be made. Who created this Bible was Joe Murray, who just left Rocko's Modern Life in 1996 and kept a notebook of ideas and TV shows. He used his days at summer camp to inspire this show, and he couldn't get the scouting thing down, which was actually so funny. He described the cartoons as like parodies of Bugs Bunny from Looney Tunes, or like Yogi Bear, as having this like calming effect with tree-filled backgrounds. And at the time, he believed that too many futuristic themes appeared in media, so he wanted to create something that would go back to the nature of it all. Camp Lazlo started from this camp-related kids book series, so he developed a concept that he felt like had enough of his lunatic characters, and decided a simple story could not sufficiently house the characters. He had to create something about like a group group of children without having high-tech stimulus. Linda Semensky, who also worked with Murray on Rocko's Modern Life, had moved to Cartoon Network and actually brought him in to solicit this new series. After hesitation, Murray ended up sending her an idea for a show called Three Beans, which would be a Bean Scout term. She thought it sounded too much like a salad, so he changed it to Camp Lazlo. Once he got the approval, he decided to produce the show at Cartoon Network, and they brought Mark O'Hare on as a co-producer. According to Murray, the greenlight process was initially given and then later revoked, which is actually really frustrating, making both of the creators depressed. Like, I would be too. Same thing happened to me when I worked at Nickelodeon. Murray believed that as an executive, he wasn't completely sold on the series, which makes a lot of sense why they felt like they needed a series Bible. As you know, this show went on for 5 seasons, being one of the most successful Cartoon Network shows ever, and even though I thought it was only going on for like 1 season, this show was actually a lot of merit. It's famous for its controversial finale, which ends up having the Scoutmaster go to an insane asylum because none of the events actually happened, which is insane to think about. We start out with the table of contents, and it's so cool that we have this long of a production Bible. Usually a lot of them get lost to history because they don't release the entire thing, or it's owned by the network, so it's very, limited. Here we got the overview, setting, series synopsis, main characters, secondary characters, notes on writing, model sheets, style, color and backgrounds, production notes, and conclusion. Whether animated show, you probably have so many more sections you have to add as opposed to like a normal live action show where you don't really have to talk about some of the drawing stuff. This is cool because it's also the perspective of a show that hasn't been sold yet, so there's a lot to prove in these documents. For example, the quick overview, Bean Scout Lazlo, along with his scouting companions, Clam and Raj, decide to try out a 4-week summer camp in the Pimpleback Mountains called Camp Kidney. Little did they know that their rebellious, nonconformist, and optimistic nature would clash so much with the neurotic Scoutmaster and all of the compulsive march-in-a-straight-line scout campers that co-inhabit the camp. Since Lazlo, Raj, and Clam, among Indian elephant and pygmy rhino respectively, vow not to leave camp until they have earned at least 1 merit badge. Their 4-week stay has turned into a couple of years, much to the torture of their moose Scoutmaster and fellow campers, which include dung beetles, platypuses, and lemmings. Couple that with a squirrel scout camp full of girls across the lake, and the summer camp will never be the same, which is a really good way to introduce the show. I didn't realize at first this show had that much conflict, and it's interesting to see that Cartoon Network kind of took that out as the show progressed a little bit. Then we get a setting page with a full background art of Camp Kidney, and honestly, it is gorgeous. Look at this. It's the Bean Scout camp next to the large lake for fishing and boating, and it's called Leaky Lake. Camp Kidney is an old camp with an old PA system that transmits announcements and plays odd camp music. The camp has Scoutmaster's house and office, as well as an assembly lounge, mess hall, boathouse, housekeeping cabin, campfire amphitheater, and scout cabins, all named after beans, like Pinto Cabin or Garbanzo Cabin, Baked Cabin. Our main characters, Lazlo, Raj, and Clam, are in the Jelly Cabin, which is decorated with pink flamingos, happy face flags, Christmas lights, and peace flags. And there's a Squirrel Scout camp across from Lake Kidney, which is so funny they keep reiterating that. And the art is so gorgeous. They even have a full map of exactly how Leaky Lake is broken down, which is insane because how often do you actually need this for the show? I love how they get so descriptive for no reason, like showing us where Acorn Flats is, Mount Whitehead, even the Skullcrack Rapids, things that might not even be shown in the show, but it's just good for the artists to know so that way it's all clear. They even include another page with a bird's eye view of Camp Kidney and Leaky Lake, which is so interesting because usually you would have this at a camp. If you were going to the forest or the woods, I like that it's actually that aesthetic. They even have a side view of it with a slope, which is so cool that they had that much imagination to describe all of this. The drawings are a lot more nuanced than they inevitably ended up being, and I love how it's that old camper style of art. It definitely reminds me of Yogi Bear. In the series synopsis, we have Camp Lazlo is an eccentric animated series that chronicles the odd and happy camping life of a bean scout named Lazlo. Lazlo joyfully skips through the poison ivy without a rash and goes head-to-head with a grouchy Scoutmaster whose only concerns are Lazlo and his cohorts earning a merit badge and leaving his otherwise orderly camp. Lazlo's ambitions, however, do not lend themselves to earning merit badges. He loves to do his best, and he cares very little about being the best or receiving material rewards, which actually is such a positive upbringing for the main character. They talk about Lazlo as a highly optimistic, high-energy, smiling Brazilian monkey who is one with the nature and the universe. His best friends, Raj, is a wise, compulsive, and insect-phobic Indian elephant, and Clam is a somewhat clueless rhino with a penchant for thrill, physical strength way beyond his size, and it's so cute how he has such loyalty to his friends. Camp Kidney is a peaceful scouting camp where Bean Scouts could come, earn merit badges, and even have a good dose of nature, run rather efficiently by a scoutmaster named Leonard Lumpus, and his ever-present banana slug assistant, Slinkman, which is such a funny character. The scout campers were usually obedient, scholarly, and didn't question authority, unlike Lazlo and his friends. Unintentionally and without malice, the trio definitely upset the entire flow of the island. We have the main character section, which has Lazlo as a free-thinking monkey in a very structured scouting camp. They emphasize in this Bible that he's without malice and that nothing is ill-intentioned, he's just optimistic and only causes chaos by accident. Kind of like SpongeBob in a way, which is so funny. Then we've got Raj, who is a new age, compulsive elephant trying to find comfort in the untidy world of a scout camp. He's born in India, and his disorders include cleaning compulsion, skin raptures, bug and snake phobias. Like, this guy is packed with everything, which is perfect contrast to the nature of the show. His sayings in his slight Indian accent are somewhat muttered, but strike a point, if not a dull point, and he joins the Bean Scouts because of his love of baked beans, which is insane. He doesn't even try to earn badges. He has a record collection and a dusty hi-fi record player, which is so cute because it is in the background of the show. Lazlo and Clam are grounding forces in his world, where happy-go-lucky are his preferable path. Aww. Then we got Clam, who is a small, loving, and very strong rhino that waddles through the camp, leaving havoc in his wake, which is so funny. He kind of reminds me of Ed from the Ed, and Eddy show. Getting himself into trouble in a childlike fashion, his friends look out for him like brothers. He has a limited vocabulary, but likes to interact vocally in a somewhat juvenile voice. They use the term midget in this, which is crazy because that's not relevant anymore the way it used to be. We can't even use that term. With his naive, brute strength, he thinks nothing of tossing a friend over the river if he needs to cross it. His happy-go-lucky smile is usually only interrupted when Raj or Lazlo are in danger, making him a really reliable and trustworthy friend. Then, of course, we have Scoutmaster Lumpus. Scoutmaster Lumpus is a frustrated egomaniac with an inferiority complex, always feeling he is the victim. He has to have his world in complete order or he has a meltdown, which is perfect because the main characters clearly are the opposite of that. He really wanted to be head troop master, but he's stuck in this job in the sticks. He abuses his assistant, Slinkman, who he could not live without, but does not like to admit it. And Lazlo is way too unpredictable for his comfort or sanity. He loves fishing and tying flies. Then, of course, we got Slinkman, the thankless job of Scoutmaster's assistant, which he did not realize what he was signing up for. He knows Lumpus' schedule much better than his own. He basically keeps the camp running because Lumpus is always breaking down, making announcements on the PA, in a voice that is reminiscent of Dustin Hoffman's Rain Man, which is an interesting reference. I don't know who Dustin Hoffman is, but the fact that they have him is so funny. He doesn't have a spine, and he's essentially the right-hand man. Then we have a page for the Lemming Bros, which I don't really remember coming up a lot in the series, so it is fun that they brought so much onto them. They're scouts that are the opposite of Lazlo. They do what they're told, no original thoughts, and represent a very structured badge-earning camp that Lumpus loves. So these are his favorite characters, but we barely talk about them because it's not even in the show, but it's good to have them to really sculpt out the world. Their names are Leonard, Lumpus, and Louie, which is very interesting. They walk alike, talk alike, and say whatever the majority thinks, which is so perfect for the structure. Then, of course, we have a page for the Squirrel Scouts, the females that are essentially the women counterpart of the regular ones. And honestly, they look so different than they do in the final. Like, look at that. There's Gretchen, an ever-hungry alligator who just wants to eat, Nina, who is a gangly, bookish giraffe with a highly squeaky voice, and Patsy, who is the chirpy squirrel in love with Lazlo, which we see many times throughout the series. Since Lazlo is so uneasy around girls, he definitely gets uncomfortable with Patsy's advances, which actually makes it so funny for him to have to deal with. It brings out a side that we wouldn't normally see. Then we get the second-tier characters, so that way we know exactly who we're dealing with whenever we're in different scenes. And you probably recognize them. I know I do. There's Dave and Ping Pong, the loons, Jane Doe, who is a deer squirrel scout, Miss Mucus, the warthog assistant, and Squirrel Scout leader, of course Samson, the guinea pig, Chip and Chip, the dung beetles, and Edward the platypus, who looks so different in this than the inevitable way it ended up. We also have a page for the third tier beans, the second tier beans, just notes for everybody animating the show. Then they actually have a page about specifically the writing. Our writing in both outlines and storyboards should be upbeat and full, not mean-spirited or abusive. Humor relies on character and how these characters react in a simple, funny storyline. There's no violence except for slapstick, scatological humor, including gas, and no sexual innuendo. Although the show appeals to young and old alike, it is a show parents would gladly sit their kids in front of to watch by themselves. All stories involve the main characters and take place in the same location, like the Bean Scout camp, Squirrel camp, or occasionally in town, and the viewer should be comfortable with where they are. So we'll use the same locations over and over again, with the plot lines super simple. Camping in the pursuit of merit badges and communing with nature in this endless wealth of material. We put the strong main characters in these structures and let it rip. With approaching the story or storyboard, one should always keep in mind that the blocks and priorities need to be addressed with each gag, story, or bit of dialogue. And here is the triangle of how they wrote this show. First up, hilarity, then of course story, then consistency of characters, premise, and the ground rules. It also has a note not to sacrifice the bottom to get to the top, which is a very interesting way of writing, and I like that they're very particular about how it's going to be written. Writing could be looked at as a game, and no game is fun without rules. So start with the basic character traits, the premise of the show, and some ground rules that we've laid out to grow the story. From the story and foundation block come the gags, and although the humor is the most important thing, we ultimately derive it from the character's personality, and do not do it at the expense of the story or the basic premise of the show. We also have some ground rules on another page. No sexual innuendos, no in-your-face type humor, no parody, limited violence, a tether of reality to the world we have created. Even though they might be talking animals, there still has to be rules of gravity and such we need to abide by, while still keeping that in mind as being a cartoon. Give your audience credit for intelligence without going over the head of younger viewers, which is smart writing. Don't leave the world we have created, and don't bring in new characters. Also, try relatable humor, pull from our own kid experiences with this camp. Start with the core relatables, then whack them out with the cartoon land. Refrain from any gags or references to that date of the episode, like making jokes about fads, fashions, current events, whatever. And finally, don't be afraid to insert warmth. Camp Lazlo has a lot of love, friendship, and peace, and if we could take some of the subtle pro-environment stances without getting a soapbox, we could definitely do it, which is so cool that they actually reference these moments. Then we got the character sheets. One is a character size comp lineup, so we see how each character is in height-wise in relation to each other to make a more realistic experience. Then they actually talk about the primary basic shapes of these characters, which all can also be referenced in a art book, which actually has its own funny story. The guy who created the show started an art book, which is a perfect masterclass in how he designed these characters, and is actually going for a lot of money right now because it's not in complete print. We also get model sheets and turnarounds, which show the characters in a bunch of different states so the writers and animators can know how they're going to look in each scenario. They also have tricks for drawing Lazlo, which actually is really interesting. They have like adding the hat, the eyes, the ear folds, like everything that you'll need to know, which is so crazy it gets this in depth. They even have do's and don'ts of every image and how it's supposed to go, which is so impressive. Like the nose is upturned, everything looks like a beetle, like oh my gosh, they were so specific. And they have one for each character, like for example, we see Raj and his model sheet, and you get to see that like when he's running, what he's wearing, and the scuba suit. We even get Clam and his model sheet, because these are the characters that we're going to be using the most of. And yeah, it's so interesting. Camp Master Lumpus also has a character sheet, which is very specific, how his eyes are drawn, and everything that makes him as a personality, like, important. Then we also have interior and exterior design, which is a really cool style sheet showing exactly how the place should be used. For example, we have like Indian rugs, rock fireplaces, and the cabin kitchen inside. Scout cabins are screened summer camp type, and all named after the Bean Scouts, which we talked about earlier. The dwellings have lean, warped perspectives, and it's definitely showing how cartoony the show inevitably is. And even the foliage background, like how the camps are supposed to look in the very background, even though it's like watercolor that you can't always see, they show exactly what kind of trees you should have, the backgrounds, and how stylized they could be, which is so cool that it actually works out like that. We also have a color palette page, which explains exactly what colors need to be prioritized in this. It's compiled from personal color tastes, but also retro references, like old camp colors and Western and Native American pillow and rug colors, canoes, cabins, and even forest hues. The warm grayish shades definitely lend themselves to the camp feel and actually show the comfort that the main writers are going. You gotta think of like marshmallows roasted on a campfire, and that would look good in that. We also have a page explaining how the backgrounds are going to work. Like the background style is a bit brushy, utilizing patterns and textures given from a retro feel. Definitely go for the late 50s and 60s in terms of advertising and architectural illustrations. Quite often, action is occurring in front of the monochromatic dense tree design, so we gotta keep it cool in the background. Kind of how thumbnails are worked. Like, you know how like you try to have a subject and then a very non-distracting background, something typically blurred. That could be interesting. They also have an image of how the jelly cabin is going to look, which is exactly close to the final design. Then we get the interior of it with this interesting image of Finn from Adventure Time, which is crazy because it didn't even happen yet. Oh, the background samples are just gorgeous. Like, look at how they go into them. I love it. Then, of course, we have some production notes from the creator. It says, "In my intention, Camp Lazlo is designed with simplicity in mind, not only to allow for the characters, gags, and stories to be read in an optimal way, but to streamline production and keeping characters, locations, and props as simple and minimal as possible to create as much as we can. Background and prop production should be structured in a way that reduces duplication to keys and designs. We utilize graphic computer programs, establishing backgrounds and other stock that can be used to produce very quick backgrounds for newer scenes. Camp Lazlo is a storyboarded rather than scripted and utilizes animatics as important tools to get the story and gags across visually, as well as, problems at a minimum. Strong key posing and character expressions could be vital, with animation working quite often pose to pose. New affordable technology should definitely be used to its potential, and I'm sure there's a lot of shows on Cartoon Network already utilizing these methods, so we need to comply simply." Oh, interesting. In the end, we have a conclusion, which is just Lazlo on the top, and it talks about how Bibles are tricky things. Even mini Bibles create certain mini illusions. They're a bit like throwing some cells into a petri dish, and even though the cells are well established, once life begins, all that we plan here might go out the window, which is so interesting he accounted for that. The characters begin living, breathing, rapping, and tripping. Who can predict some of the happy accidents that will happen, and then we will have to reevaluate this entire thing, which is actually funny. But to the best of his ability, at this time, they have this blueprint. But to the best of my ability, at this time, this is the blueprint I can offer that will make these characters live and will create entertainment that I feel will be hilarious and will provide a healthy return on investment. Beyond that, only a fun time is guaranteed for all. Thanks for watching. Joe Murray puts a little back on this book, which is perfect for Cartoon Network Studios and definitely exemplifies what they were going for at the time. It's so cool to see Bibles like fully go all out on what they want to do, and I like that this guy's unapologetically acknowledging that this is not going to be the definitive, like, how the show is going to go. Things are going to change just like they always do, and Camp Lazlo is a perfect example of that. There's just so much positive spirit in this Bible and how it's supposed to go that you don't even necessarily need to refer to the TV series at a certain point. Like, if you're a fanfic writer, you could definitely figure out how to make your own episodes of Camp Lazlo just by this book alone. So you can imagine how this show would have kept going or how it would have shortened. It's so cool to think that these creative endeavors are really worthwhile paying off. I personally spent a lot of time on my production Bibles, especially when I'm doing like short stories. For example, when I wrote the book, The Consequences of Victoria Gray, I kept everything super minimal and wrote like rules that I thought you had to abide by, even as the reader. So it's cool to think that as a creative person, you have that much control over the final product, and then also the ability to let it go before it ends up coming out. That's one of the coolest parts of all of this stuff.
I'm almost there! I got it! Almost lost you, little buddy.
The Ed and Eddy Bible is super simplistic, especially compared to what we've looked at before. Foster's Home was more character-driven, so it was essentially only words and focused on the story and relationships to the characters. Camp Lazlo was a lot more about the camp experience, so it was formatted like a Bean Scout guidebook. It's always really impressive how these animators choose to go about their pitch Bibles, because it really says a lot to the identity of the show and what it morphs into over time. For example, Ed, Edd n Eddy kind of reminds me a lot of SpongeBob, where it's more storyboard driven, focused on visual comedy and gags, but there's a lot more that meets the eye, especially when it comes to this Bible. I think they figured out a lot more than I gave them credit for at the very beginning. Like, this show seems like very nonsensical, absurdist, but everything is very intentional and well thought out, with action never quite stopping. And this is one of the few shows I've seen that like really takes multiple turns within its 10-minute episode structures. Like, normally it would be one plot, but sometimes Ed and Eddy comes with like 3 storylines that kind of mold into each other by the end. And that's something normally a 20-minute episode is supposed to pull off. So these guys are very creative and story-driven when it comes to how they animate. The front page of the Bible is probably like my favorite. It just says Ed and Eddy. They're friends because they have the same name. Which is actually so funny, because I never considered the fact that they are like the most low maintenance friends, and they might not like objectively care for each other at first. It was just like a convenience thing, but it did grow into this really important relationship for all 3 of the Ed brothers. And their designs are totally what they ended up being. I love how kind of get their personality just by the expressions on their face. And yeah, like, I at first wouldn't think this was a very interesting show, except for knowing what I know, like, in the future, which is so confusing. It says, puberty is unforgiving, which is the perfect tagline for a show like this, where you actually want to explore, like, what it's like to be a child versus being an adult. Like, that's what Cartoon Network did best. Hey, like, Kids Next Door, anybody? Yeah. They also say this exact line in the episode of the pilot, which is so interesting that they really stuck to the idea that, like, being a child is sometimes gross, sometimes embarrassing, but that's, like, where you find the true humor in it. Then it says, and Danny Anatucci cartoon at the very bottom, the creator. And I'm not sure if you've seen these actors outside of the TV show, but they actually look exactly like their Ed counterparts. They even react that way to each other, which is so funny.
Yeah, baby, just feel the filth. No, filthy, filthy, dirty, dirty.
Well, I'm just like, I love that one.
You're sweet.
Yup,
Pepe.
Robbie Top Santa Claus is coming to town.
Obviously, the animation is part of the identity, so, like, coinciding both is what really makes the show real. But if you just look up a couple of YouTube clips of these guys talking, it is pretty ridiculous. The first 2 pages pretty much sum up the entire show within only a few words. A gag-laden, best-generated cartoon bumper car ride of 3 misfit youths in a cul-de-sac in the suburbs of America. Through summer vacation, part-time jobs, or just hanging out at the corner mailbox, they want to belong, but can't. From home chores, helping neighbors, or eating jawbreakers, they want to fit in, but can't. Why does it say so many times? Ed is into bee-monster movies, model kits, and is quick to break out into rashes. Lots of luck. Ed is into chemistry, biology, and prone to crushes. Oh, later. Eddy is into pranks, is stylish, and flaunts himself to the world. Yeah, right. Oh, I see. Ed, Edd n Eddy is a show about confusion and contradiction, that awkward part of youth, pimples, big feet, oily hair, and girls? Yeah, puberty is unforgiving. This is copyrighted in 1996, which is a year before this even came out. Then on the second page, it says show description. True cartoon style, inventive, non-parody, fast-paced, stretch, and squash. Damn, they really talk about what they don't want the show to be a lot, like saying non-parody, and like the Camp Lazlo Bible said specifically they don't want like negative humor. Like, I never realized how much control they had of what they didn't want the show to be. This also says beat-driven, even when it comes to characters. They stop and hold with a bounce cycle. Adults never bounce. Music can play, important part, not just fill. And it's not a musical, so you gotta make sure it's not actually too campy. School year's over, yeah, and the long hot summer vacation begins. What to do? Stuck in the cul-de-sac in the suburbs of America is the last place you want to spend a summer break, especially when you find life confusing and contradicting. Ed, Edd n Eddy is about friendship and serves to remind us that there are no good old days, just smelly runners. You can tackle anything when you're with your pals. Their days are spent for knowledge, acceptance, and some cash for jawbreakers. Armed with pimples, big feet, and oily hair, the three amigos trek into the unknown. Ed, Edd n Eddy are dying to be grown-ups, but they're kids, and attack adulthood as only kids would. Simple situations turn into manic roller coaster rides. Don't forget your barf bag. They just want to belong, and they're willing to pull off any insane stunt to prove it. First, they need to figure out what it is they want to belong to. And this is really interesting because it reminds me of the one episode where Ed and Eddy were breaking reality. You know, like taking a bite out of the moon, taking the lines off their animations. It all like falls in line with exactly what the Bible was trying to set up, even though to me it felt like they were breaking cartoons. So it is cool that like even in the second season they were really committed to what the cartoon was going to be. If you haven't seen that yet, I just dove into the second season, the 26 episodes that make up the crazy season of Ed and Eddy. So you guys have to check that out if you haven't yet.
Hey, new episodes. New?
Every Friday!
Lakers at 7 o'clock. New episodes.
Every Friday!
Cartoon surrealism. Viewers will see the show as Ed and Eddy would. Less important things tend to blend into the background, while objects of Ed and Eddy's desires are focused, premise-driven, which is interesting because it's storyboard-driven, but also premise-driven, so it's kind of more like a visual storytelling. Then first we have Ed, with a little bit of a character design and a description. Attention deficiency syndrome. He has trouble. He can't, okay, he draws all day in class. When Eddy gets a bright idea, Ed's in. Ed is easily talked into doing Eddy's hard work. He has great physical strength. Eddy's happiest with his model kits and B-Monster movies, and he draws his knowledge from his movies. Oh my gosh. Ed smells. Flies are attracted to him. That's probably why you see the animated flies all the time. And he has sayings for every situation. Here's one. You could change your shirt, and Bingo was his name. What? Ed's perpetually a slave to his younger sister's whims and whines. He also has to babysit his baby sister, let her watch TV whenever she wants, or let her dress him up in mom's clothes. Ed also breaks out in rashes. He's allergic to practically everything, especially guinea pigs. Which is funny because it inevitably turned into rabbits when they got the show going. Ed's mom Xeroxes his sketches and doodles for her therapist. Oh my god, I didn't even think about, like, the parents. I can't believe they came up with all of this. Ed's dad hopes to pass on to his son his knowledge of pre-owned auto sales. Oh my gosh, I wonder if this is based off like a real person because it just feels so real. His facial expressions, which is so funny, this is like all they had for the first season. Like they end up getting so much funnier as the show goes on. Calling them Ed heads is like the best. Then we have Double D. Ed is really smart. He's really quiet. Ed is unnaturally polite. He hasn't been able to take the gym ever since the dodgeball incident. He's been excused to free study time in the library. Oh my gosh, of course. He doesn't like it when people touch things. Here's another one of his quotes. You may enter my room, but don't touch my Lego robot. Thank you. Oh my gosh, very creepy sounding. Double D's learning to play the pedal steel guitar. His mom makes him. Oh my gosh. Ed's prone to crushes. Girls at school, in his neighborhood, TV, anatomy books. He mails true loves his socks. Oh, what the heck? I cannot understand that. Double D's ready for the action, even though he can calculate the implications. And he constantly mumbles, which is so real for him. No one ever sees his parents. They both work nights. They communicate to their son solely through post-it notes. Double D's not allowed to touch anything in the house while they're gone. Literally anything. Oh my gosh. Yeah, then we got a side-by-side of the character Ed, his different facial expressions, and I'm loving these facial expressions. They are so funny. Next, we have a character description for Eddy. He is an exhibitionist, a megalomaniac, quote from his report card. Eddy is the unofficial leader of the trio. He's always got a plan, a stunt, or a weird noise. He's the class clown. He loves showing off. He loves being the center of attention, no matter how stupid the reason is, which is so real for this character. Eddy is the only kid in his grade to have been expelled for a whole week from school. It was his turn to set up video for science class, and he switched our friend Yeast for a video he borrowed from his parents' room. Oh my god, that's inappropriate. They even have inappropriate jokes within this Bible, just because it probably won't end up on screen anyway. Before Eddy's brother went away, interesting, I'm surprised why they have him like mysteriously disappear. He enlightened Eddy with the legends of the neighborhood. Eddy knows where all the abandoned tree houses are, which sewer pipes are safe to spelunk, and the secret recipe for the El Mongo stink bomb. It's been in the family for years. He's the one who's the most able to pretend like he knows it all and doesn't care what anybody else thinks about him. His genes are working the fastest. Eddy's dad is constantly concerned that Eddy may grow up to be a figure skater. Eddy's mom never believes his little darling was involved in such a heinous act. And oh my god, I didn't realize his parents were so conservative. That's so interesting. They also have his heads, which are super funny too. I can't believe it's this early on though. Then we get a little bit of the neighborhood kids, a different sketch of each of them, and it kind of doesn't say too much about them because I guess they didn't have it figured out quite yet, but these guys are so funny. Oh, they even have Plank as a part of Johnny, which is so interesting they put that in so early. Oh, then we get a small description of each of the characters. We start with Sarah, Ed's baby sister. It's her way or the highway. She has everything done for her. If not, she'll make them do it. She could be quick to judge, whiny, a tantrum for every occasion. More than a handful for Ed, or Eddy. Thinks Double D's kinda cute. Who wants Eddy to move to another planet? Oh my gosh. Yeah, Sarah is just such a funny character, especially in relation to Ed. Then we have Jimmy, Sarah's best friend. He's always playing with girls. Boys are just too rough. He's accident prone. Whenever we see him, he has a different affliction. Band-aids, patches, casts, lumps. He's very clean. The Eds frightened him. They're such brutes. Why does it have that in here? Jimmy is like probably the funniest quotes of the whole show, I swear. Ralph, first generation of a landed immigrant family. Nationality, not so important. He's proud of his heritage. He has peculiar traditions or customs. He eats weird things. He has hair on his back. Yuck. He confuses the Eds to no end. And he confuses the other kids to no end. He's a pretty simple character. He didn't have a lot figured out. And they never, mention his homeland or, where they intended to have him. And they seem to, not be ashamed of it. Then we got Johnny 2x4. He's a wanderer and very inquisitive. From early morning to supper time, he's always outside playing with his buddy Plank. Plank is a wooden board that Johnny drew a face on with a crayon. Johnny has a wonderful conversations with Plank. Plank is a piece of wood. Johnny makes himself very accessible to the Eds. Aw, he's definitely a loyal one. Then we have Naz. She's calm, cool, and assertive. She's the most mature out of all the kids, or at least she thinks. She's into makeup and fashion magazines, and boy, Sarah thinks she's awesome, wants to be just like her when she grows up. Aw, I didn't realize that connection. When she enters a scene, all activities stop. Boys freeze, they sweat, their hearts beat faster and faster, and they lose their ability to talk. When she leaves, they recover and conclude it was something they ate. And she thinks the Eds are funny. Oh my gosh, of course. Then Kevin has the shortest, most simplest description ever. He is cynical and sarcastic. He thinks he knows the routine. That's because he watches 60 Minutes. Then we have the other neighborhood kids, which they don't define as anything else besides just other. And it's the Kanker sisters, everybody's classic favorites. May, Lee, and Marie. The funniest, Ed counterparts. These gals are tough. They bother, bully, provoke, and bewilder everybody, not just the Eds. They live in the motorhome park on the other side of the cul-de-sac. The other kids has never been there. Oh, interesting. They're proud of Tammy Faye Baker memorabilia. Who is that? Their project, Cooking with Ketchup, closed down their school for a whole week. Oh my gosh, no details there. Oh, okay. No one likes them, especially the Eds. Despite the fact they are determined to marry the Eds. They want them to do their dishes. What a weird request. Okay, yeah. So yeah, all the Canker sisters, the side relation chart with the Eds and the Canker sisters specifically is so funny. We have a little page dedicated to their love for Jawbreakers, where each of them are actually super happy, and that's actually a really sweet image. This, I feel like, is lost to time. When I see something shiny, how they run, because they do run a lot in this show. Then we have a little storyboard test, something they made in 2004. So it's like something they created for other people trying to write for this show, which is always interesting. You get to see how other people put their own voice within the series for Ed, Edd n Eddy, so this must have been written by Danny Iannucci himself. Please read the following paragraph and all other material supplied thoroughly. It's important to familiarize yourself with each character and their specific traits. Remember, it's not what the Eds do, it's how they do it. Please board it to the best of your ability. And remember, we have a fiery pit out back, so don't cheat. Oh my gosh, what the heck? You have 1 week to complete the paragraph. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Good luck, and finally, have fun. It's a cartoon. Then we see a description for an episode. It's raining Eds. Ed, Edd n Eddy are standing on the Ed's front lawn. Double D hands Eddy a large stick of bubble gum. Ed tells Eddy that he blended the gum with a vulcanized rubber to create extra strength gum bubble. Eddy hands Ed the gum and tells him to start chewing. Ed chews like it's got a tire in his mouth. Ed blows a huge bubble and starts to lift off the ground. Luckily, Double D has already tied a pegged rope to Eddy's foot to keep him from floating away. Eddy pulls the rope peg, but keeps hanging on, telling Ed to float him to the candy store. Double D yells for Eddy to not let go, but it's too late. Double D follows frantically on the ground as they float away. Kevin looks up and sees Ed and Eddy floating by. He's holding a ball and a hat. Kevin swats a fly ball towards the bubble and pop. Ed and Eddy plummet down and Kevin howls. Also, please do not get caught up trying to mimic the ink line of the show. That will be done in animation. Refer to the storyboard example for reference. Oh, cool. So this is like one of the examples of like how they will draw for the series. None of this specific description is not an episode in the show, which is really interesting. Like, I feel like it's just made for the animators, but that's so cool that they even like tried to do this. Then we have some more images of all the three Eds in their like natural habitat, a little bit of Double D, then a little bit more of the neighborhood kids, which is nice. A lot more of Eddy to really get a vibe for the main character. Oh, and then we start to see some of the locations. It actually has like a breakdown, like the episode, the model, and the description. This one is for Ed or Tails, which is an actual episode. It's so funny because obviously they can just reuse this at any time. And then we have an attachment of the storyboard that they're specifically using for the AKA cartoon episode.
Cartoon!
And it's so interesting that they have like a very specific style they're going for this. Like, Ed, Edd n Eddy is such a wild show down to its very core. But yeah, that's the entire show of Ed, Edd n Eddy. It definitely feels a lot more bare bones, but because they're trying to focus specifically on animation and the drawing of characters themselves. We get just enough of the side characters that they're not super distracting, and then we really know the core of our main cast, like the fears and wants and desires of the main Eds. I can't believe we even know a lot about their parents throughout this Bible. Like, what in the world were they ready for? Because this is just so well thought out. The music being a specific point that it's not a musical and the music coincides with the plot is very interesting. I can't believe we even get a sample of what the other writers for this show would have had to deal with when they're storyboarding. Like, it's so cool to actually be transported back into the time when Ed, Edd n Eddy was first being written. Like, 1997 was such a specific year. You know, I was being born, so obviously I had plans that day, but the rest of the stuff going on was really cool. And yeah, my favorite part of all is just they're best friends because they have the same name. That is like the moral of the story in a nutshell. If you rewatch the first or second season, like you'll definitely get the vibe of all of this show in a perfect way. So please check out my first season retrospective going over the first 26 episodes, and then the second one with the second 26 episodes. And I can't wait to jump into more Ed, Edd, and Eddy as time goes on, but I just wanted time to let this breathe, because this is a long and complicated show with at least like 3 stories per 10-minute episode. Like, it's almost hard to keep track of. Just watch it back, guys. I swear it's not going to be what you remember it. In the best way, of course. Of course, having time for Johnny and Plank is probably my favorite part of this entire Bible. I can't believe like how set in their ways they were about it. So yeah, that was Ed, Edd, and Eddy.
That's where I left him.
Billy and Mandy has always been one of the most existential cartoons I've ever seen. Like Courage the Cowardly Dog, they really tackled horror, did a good job at making things nightmare fuel. And Ed, Edd, and Eddy did a good job at like making comedy and characters work really well. And I feel like the Grim Adventures are just a sum up of both of those shows, just like brought to a 10, and add like really grotesque imagery, a mockery of like myth and legends, and just add the underworld, and you've got this like crazy concoction of a Hansel and Gretel like comedy. Cartoon Network must have known what they were doing with Maxwell Adams, because if you've ever like seen this guy or heard about like his personality, he's just like a very existential thinker, with a lot of his art having to do with mortality somehow being bent. He did a lot of other Cartoon Network shows and even does a podcast currently, which I love to watch. If you haven't checked it out, please check out Maxwell Adams. And he's always been very generous about sharing his behind-the-scenes process, like old art and how he came up with a bunch of different ideas. And his story is just so unique. Like he had such an interesting view of the world in a way that Cartoon Network just like was definitely vibing with at the time.
The 3 of us have lots of fun together. Like messing with werewolves or making giant monsters.
Come on now.
He's right, Grim. You do introduce us to a lot of interesting characters.
If you grew up with watching any of these 6 seasons, you'll know that it started out a lot darker and just became a more ensemble-like show with a lot of extra characters that add really fun depth to it. Like, for example, there's Eris, the Princess of Chaos, and she makes a couple returns. There's Hoss Delgado, who is a monster hunter that hunts down people like Grimm. And one of my favorites, Dracula, which is just an old man, essentially. The way they paint these worlds are not just like dark and gruesome, but they're funny and grounded in a weird, twisted way. Regular Show would be one of these weird out-of-body experiences that like capitalized on a format like this, but this was like the very origin of Cartoon Network going off the walls with the dark type stuff. Since the creator is so open about like the process of how he came up with this show, it wasn't hard for me to find character model sheets, old premises, and cool ideas that were thought up of before the show became as popular as it did. If you guys can remember, it started out as a different show, Grim and Evil, with its first season being broken down. You could learn more about that as I cover it in my first season retrospective. And yeah, it's really confusing how it got to through its development process. It was originally a spin-off of a show called Evil Con Carne, which is actually about just like group of supervillains, which all make an appearance back on Billy and Mandy eventually, as you could recall their familiar faces. But yeah, I want to go back to a time where none of this stuff was ever fully developed yet, and we're still looking at these characters as if they're new people to the screen, and this is a show that we're not sure is going to work. Yeah, so let's jump into the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy's original pitch Bible. We've gone over Camp Lazlo, Ed, Edd, and Eddy, even Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, but the pitch Bible for Grim Adventures is a little bit different. Yeah, we get our character model sheets, that's definitely it. It's more so where the expectations started versus where it ended up. I feel like Ed, Edd, and Eddy and Camp Lazlo definitely became exactly like what they preached. Same thing with Foster's Home, but they only really talked about their characters because it was a very character-driven Bible. This one's a very like animated animated driven Bible. A lot of notes on the way their eyes should look, how they react to certain situations. Like, it's very focused on like the physical comedy of it all, which I really appreciate, especially since like the other ones lean into something different. I found a pitch page online called the Infernal Main Model Pack, which is more so all the drawings that Maxwell Adams was intending to share. But that one was like updated a bunch of times. Like, it's definitely the series Bible going forward. I'm talking about going back to the original pitch. Yeah. So we're going to go back even further than this Infernal Party Pack to even before when Maxwell Adams started sharing all this stuff. So we got the first page. It just says Billy and Mandy. It doesn't say the Grim Adventures. And yeah, we got the skeleton with his scythe. And yeah, the lines are drawn a little bit more exaggeratedly. Like, I feel like it seems like a Hanna-Barbera cartoon instead of necessarily a Cartoon Network one, but that would make sense because it started out being more that network than it did this one. You know, like Johnny Test, Ed and Eddy, like, these were earlier signs of what Billy and Mandy would eventually be. And this one was trademarked in 1998, so you know it was like one of the original 90s shows that you'd grow up watching in the 2000s. Billy kind of looks more like a monkey, which I thought he had a tail, but it turns out to just be Grimm's overcoat being stretched a little too long. Mandy looks completely different, also kind of like a monkey. What is with these monkey vibes? I swear, these kids are so little. But I like that Mandy's already frowning, even from the first draft. Like, that just shows how in tune he was with what wanted to happen. And I hope that, like, they mention that Mandy was super evil from the very beginning. Like, that's something I'm looking forward to. Grimm being so serious is interesting. I wonder if they intended him to be like this goofball or eventually the straight man in this trio dynamic. But yeah, Billy being stupid is probably one of the funniest things that motivate the show anyway, so I would be surprised. The description is, little kids have a lot to deal with growing up. Friends, bullies, who gets to watch what show on TV, but they also have to worry about closet monsters and that funny sound in the attic. Billy and Mandy are no different, except they have a very unusual best friend, the Grim Reaper. Through him, they meet the monsters, aliens, and mythical characters that populate his world. While the adults right now might not notice, it's absolutely real to Billy and Mandy. Ooh, already off to a great start. I feel like that's the perfect pitch. Like, they always start these cartoons with something in related to a normal, grounded kid-like experience. Like with Ed and Eddy, they were focused on growing up in the cul-de-sac. With Camp Lazlo, they were talking about summer camp. There's always like a real element that grounds like puberty or like actual issues kids are going through, because that's just what the network had. You know, like if you're focused on ages 7 to 11, of course you want to make stories that they could relate to. And this one, despite the fact that you have literally the Grim Reaper being a part of it, it's just so down to earth. That's when we get Billy's original character description, which, by the way, all the colors are so significantly different. Like, it doesn't even look like the original show anymore, especially with the skull background. Like, it makes me think like this was before they actually got committed to Grimm's interpretation of a skeleton. So this is what it reads. Sure, he might not be the smartest kid in school, or the best athlete, or the best at anything else. At least Billy is happy being who he is. Like a dog, he's loyal, perpetually happy, and loves to play. He genuinely likes his neighbor Mandy, and takes her abuse and degrading remarks without complaint. He thinks Grimm is just about the coolest guy in the world, often calling him the G-Man, while he's trying to show off. Billy's a bit of a mama's boy. If his mom tells him to come home and eat his liver and onions at 5, Billy will be there by 4:30. In fact, Billy's only fear is upsetting his mom. Billy's a catalyst for action in the show. His clumsiness and curiosity are constantly getting him and his best friends into trouble. And I like how he kind of has like a sinister look to him, like any of this is what he does on purpose, when really the show just dumps him down further and further, with less interest in being about him caring about his mom, just being inconsiderate for the sake of being inconsiderate. Like, Billy just goes off the walls with some of the stuff he does. And it's interesting to think that, like, Grimm is kind of a secret in the earlier version of these pitch pages, because I'm getting the impression that, like, the world doesn't know all the connections that it has to the underworld, especially since that became more of, like, a recurring thing by season 2. So, yeah, it's so interesting they didn't account for that quite yet. I feel like Billy's personality has changed a lot since what I'm seeing here, and it's better because it, like, contrasts with Mandy, like the more positive he is and the more goofy, with his relationship with Grimm always being casual. It seemed like they knew that he would just not take Grimm seriously ever, which is the perfect relationship to have a show that's so dark and somebody who just doesn't see it that way. At least like they show that he's confident and he's sure of himself, despite the fact he's like so ridiculously dumb. And then we got some character models for Billy, like we get to see what they originally intended him to have his reactions with. I also took some of these from the animated model pack, so like these are images that the writers and animators for the show would get if they were like coming to be on the show just for an episode or like just a few episodes. Like it definitely paints a picture of what kind of show you're writing for. I'm not sure if you saw my Ed and Eddy retrospective, but they even had like the animation test that the writers would do before they got a job on the specific show. I didn't find anything like that for Billy and Mandy, but it is interesting to see how they were intending on this going. Like Billy looks like a very specific way, and they even have limitations as to how they want him to be portrayed. Having him being like such an idiot is like such a very specific type of personality quirk. They want to be like very meticulous about it, especially when we start talking about Mandy, for example. So yeah, Mandy's original character description is as follows. Playing straight man to Billy is his unsmiling neighbor and friend Mandy. Ooh, I like that right off the bat that they said she doesn't smile. This also feels like a My Life as a Teenage Robot sketch. Like, I feel like the animation seems a little bit more 60s or like early Disney as opposed to what it ended up being. Like more Courage the Cowardly Dog or like Scooby-Doo-esque. Like this definitely had like a lot friendlier of vibes. I feel like Maxwell Adams knew it was like a cartoony show, so like he wanted to like fit that model. Mandy's one goal in life is to establish and retain control over everything. She's a control freak. She has no need to resort to shouting or physical violence to get her way. Through her cold, deadpan remarks, she can bend anyone or anything against her will, and she's proud of this talent. Mandy's parents seem to know she's in control, and they let her pretty much do whatever she wants. She's also the one person who could frighten death himself. Mandy sees Grimm as a challenge. When Grimm doesn't do what Mandy wants him to do, conflict ensues, and Mandy invariably comes out on top. Oh, interesting. Like, I feel like just by saying this stuff, you're saying that Mandy is always going to be in control, always in power. Like, they always intended her on being the center of everything that happens. And it's funny that they call her straight man, because I definitely see Grimm more as that. Like, she is just as psychotic as Billy at times. So I feel like they leaned into that as the show progressed, and like, her dark and serious controlling vibe just got more realistic and like grounded in actual power as opposed to anything that's like even a joke. Like, I'm surprised how real it got. They say she's a control freak, but in a lot of shows like this at the time, you would think neurotic or like very controlling, but she's like very different compared to other characters because of how she maintains her presence. You know, like she's never smiling. She never like has like those crazy stressed vibes like a normal character like that would. Like, she is just always in control, and it's so fun that like we have such a unique character to do that. Then we have Grimm. The Grim Reaper is a sinister 9-foot-tall figure in a flowing black robe. He speaks in a deep voice with a distinguished British accent. British? Oh my gosh. That's so funny that they said it was British at first. Once all-powerful, Grimm has been reduced to a pathetic shadow of his former self. Due to a lost bet with Mandy, Grimm can't use his supernatural powers, rendering him a comical figure rather than a scary one. Now he's forced to live with Billy and Mandy and be their best friend. Grimm introduces them to all sorts of bizarre, supernatural, and mythological characters. Even though he's been forced into this relationship with Billy and Mandy against his will, he eventually grows to like them, though he will never admit it. Grimm is only truly happy when he's complaining or making bitter, sarcastic remarks, which is very real. I love that we're coming from the perspective of like a midlife crisis, like especially since you feel bad for him, he's like kind of pathetic as being the Grim Reaper. His early designs are a lot thinner and a lot more like just depressing than necessarily like neurotic. I feel like he took a lot of the character traits we expected to see with Mandy and like became the more straight character. Of course, the fact that it says a British accent early on is like such a red flag because that is not how he ended up at all. And they also mention that, like, he has to not use his powers because of the bet, when really the bet is just about them being best friends and having to stay in their lives. They must have taken that out so they can actually have supernatural related things. Like, I get we have a lot of items he uses. He still has the scythe, but ideally, like, they never really explain why he never can use his power. I feel like logically, like, he shouldn't be able to use his powers if he was really subordinate to Mandy. So, like, they kind of wrote around that just to let him be able to do whatever he wants. And yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. You have to look at these character designs, though. Grimm is, like, one of my favorite characters, and I feel like they really found his grounding in these newer model sheets. Like, the very earlier ones, when it was Grim and Evil and the original show title, it just felt a little bit different, a little too cartoony. Like, the more lighting effects they got, the more green and dark green aesthetics they, like, leaned into, the more it felt like a distinct show with a specific voice. You'll also notice the music in the show transition from being from Guy Moon, who is the guy who did Fairly Odd Parents, to have more realistic, darker tones in the later episodes. Maxwell Adams talked about this on his Tumblr. If you want to find more behind the scenes, like, interesting stuff, he, like, sells some character model sheets, even storyboard images on his site, which, by the way they storyboard this show is so interesting. Of course, it's, like, comedically driven, with a lot of the jokes being, like, pretty detailed and, like, sketched out. So it is fun to look at this and actually, like, remember how good the show was animated. We have a little page dedicated to myths and monsters, saying, Grimm, being thousands of years old, has made a lot of acquaintances and enemies. Through their relationship with Grimm, Billy and Mandy run into all sorts of aliens, mythological figures who know Grimm from the past, which you'll see a lot of. Like, we have some characters that would eventually grow up to be more mainstays on the show. For example, we see, like, the gorilla, the alien. Those characters never come back. Then there's this pig with, like, a man's face on his stomach. What? Yeah, he's just like a little devil. If you actually watch the show, you'll know that they actually get way more disturbing than even these images. Like, these don't even do justice to the show Billy and Mandy. Eris is here with her special apple, which is cool that, like, they always kept after this. I'm just surprised Haas Delgado isn't in some of these images. But they do a really good job at connecting Grimm's characters to his backstory, like having the Yeti involved, having all these, like, horror figures, and Grimm always having a relationship with them, whether it's to take their life or something in the old Grim Reaper era of things. Like, it's good how consistent they keep it. Then we have a sizometer. It's funny that they call it here, because in looking at all the characters and their relation to one another, you have to see, like, how each of them size up, and it's cool because it's, like, it's definitely a consistency thing. You want to keep the continuity really precise, and you could tell, like, how much effort went into these drawings. Like, they are just so particular. They're very, like, the lines are very distinct. It almost feels like a children's book gone wrong, and in a better way than it was originally in the Grim and Evil images. The Infernal main model pack has such a cool, like, image to its front. I wish this was actually published. I mean, it makes sense because this was a model sheet made in 2004, like, way after they had the original sketches for what they wanted the show to be eventually. Yeah, but seeing that all modernized is a lot more interesting. And having the full name, The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, it just shows how committed they eventually became to the show. Oh, we have some other images of Harold and the mom, a lot of really cool stuff. Mandy has, like, a whole turnaround sheet, which shows her at every angle for the animators. Definitely really good. They have her poses, which is a lot of what she does in the first season. Like, it feels like this is, like, a lot more accurate to what they wanted her to have. Grimm's facial expressions are very specific. They have, like, Grimm in an extreme pose with his mouth wide open. Sometimes expressions get so extreme that the features won't even fit onto his face. In cases like this, feel free to push eyebrows and lower jaws outside of the character's head shapes. Oh, that's funny. We don't try to draw true perspective on Billy and Mandy, but we do like to fake perspective. Here's a low angle on Grimm's head, showing the curvature of his lower jaw. Oh, cool. And we have a top-down view of Grimm's head. Very, very specific. I like how intense he was on this. Same thing with Billy. It says, like, point of lip can break the shape of the face. It says, like, the point of lip can break the shape of the face or remain inside, but please avoid tangents. Okay. Like, I like to see lower eyelids flat and upper eyelids curved. Ooh, I like that there's like a visual image. There's like a visual communication in this one, especially since this guy is like a well-seasoned animator. Like, he knew exactly how to communicate to other writers. I always wonder if like they have like conversations like this in person, or they're all just writing and drawing separately. Like, that's always something I wondered about back then. And then they explain like how Billy's eyes actually work, why he doesn't have pupils. Oh, and then in comparison to Grimm's eyes, who he just has like holes in his face, but they always have like a way to do each expression. Especially with Grimm's turnarounds, you get to see exactly what they were going for. His poses are my favorite, though. I love seeing his like over-exaggerated faces, like when he's dressed as a clown. And they have side characters too, which I really like. Even like seeing Spurg is a nice one. And I just can't get over how many images there are of Grimm. Like, these are just so fire. Yeah, all around, this whole Bible felt a lot more animated than necessarily story-driven, but it makes sense because, you know, it's a very animated show. I guess Maxwell Adams just had such a particular view of, like, which mythology they're going to lean into this episode, or, like, how Grimm is going to lose his scythe, what Billy's stupid thing he's going to do this time. I just wish we got to see, like, episode premises and how much more writing went into it. If anything, there's, like, not a lot of proof that there was thought brought into this show. But it's impossible for me to believe that, because I've seen these episodes. Like, they're very, very well written. Like, there has to be some more of a written element as opposed to just a storyboard. It's just cool to watch Billy and Mandy unfold in this way. But yeah, if you wanted to find out any more information on these character models, or like old storyboards, even scripts I was able to find, you could just type in Maxwell Adams on Google. Like, you will find all this stuff. He even sells a lot of this with his autograph on it. He's a very considerate animator, and really cares about his fans. So if you want to learn more about him or like his side projects, please check him out online on Tumblr and get answers to the questions you might have about Billy and Mandy, because I know that I'm not answering all of them for you guys. But what do you think of this thing? Do you think it like really replicates what Billy and Mandy inevitably ended up being? Or do you think there was some shocking parts that like didn't align with what the show inevitably created? I wouldn't be surprised, given the first couple seasons and how much experimenting Cartoon Network and Maxwell Adams had to do together before they came up with this amazing 6-season show. But yeah, I'd love to know your thoughts and concerns below.
And things are getting very political in the house.
Pyramid smells like poop.
A little bit ago, we dived into the pitch Bible for Camp Lazlo, where we discovered hidden stories in the characters, the plan, and the art of what Camp Lazlo was going to be before it was brought to the screen. And I wanted to do that again with another show. So looking into the internet, I've been able to find a bunch of different production and pitch Bibles that actually encapsulate all these famous shows we grew up loving in the 2000s, tracing back all from their first pitch document. And this is so cool because you never know what you'll find, whether it's new characters, cut ideas, or just the way the show was presented to the network that made it so successful. It's just all around interesting for different stories. Today, I found Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, which you'll never believe how different this Bible is from other ones I've seen or read in the past. So as you can remember, Foster's Home came out in 2004, ran for 6 seasons, 78 episodes total. If you haven't seen already, I've gone over every individual season as its own retrospect, and I adored watching this show. It is the perfect amount of hilarity, absurdism, and just downright drama. And you'll see that the drama that was always infused in Foster's was planned from the very beginning when we dive into these page documents. So let's jump into the Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends show Bible.
I'll take it from here.
Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends is set up in a very particular way. I feel like it looks more like pitch pages than it does necessarily a series Bible. But it's super interesting to know how much they accounted for before they even began shooting this show. It's a lot more words than pictures, and I have another Bible I found online that doesn't really feel like the final one, but the pictures still feel like very early on, so I wanted to at least look at it. This was marked in September 26, 2003. As you may remember, August 13th, 2004 is when the show officially aired, so this must have been way before that.
Imaginary Man! Mac, will you be my sidekick?
On the main page, we have written out, at one time or another, every child has had an imaginary friend. But have you ever wondered what happens when that child has outgrown their imaginary friend? Where do such unwanted imaginary friends go? Well, they go to Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, a vast, sprawling Victorian mansion with enough room for hundreds of imaginary friends. Here, lonely friends can find food, shelter, and the hope of being adopted by a new family. This unique shelter is constantly overrun with fantastic characters from any place in the world, from any period in time, all thought up by imagination, and their caretakers live their lives together and try to get along all the while hoping for the day they get to go to their new home with a new child to love them. The stories of Foster's focus on one particular resident, an imaginary friend named Blue, who was created by a smart and sensitive 8-year-old boy named Mac. Oh, it's so interesting that, Mac was one of the first named characters. Blue moved into a home when Mac's mom told him he was too old for Blue. Mac was not ready to part with Blue, so he took him to Foster's, and the staff agreed that as long as Mac visits him every day, Blue would never be adopted to another child. So, every day after school, Mac diligently goes to the home to visit Blue and the other imaginary friends, which is more fun than you could possibly imagine. Ooh, that was a good pun, I like that.
Hey there, my name is Blue, and I'm best friends with Mac.
Hey, Blue.
Hey, Mac. Mac's got a great imagination. I should know because he imagined me. Just like other kids imagine this guy.
Hey, my socks match my wristband.
Him.
Hola, why do you stare?
And her. Not to mention all these imaginary friends.
Mac is very smart, creative, somewhat shy, who's just moved into town with his mother and older brother after their parents divorced. With the move, Mac has yet to make any friends, so he spends a lot of time alone in his thoughts, particularly with the thought named Blue. Blue is one of the imaginary friends who resides at Foster's, not to mention he's Mac's best friend, which is why Mac spends most of his free time at the house. Many of the friends at Foster's have really taken to Mac. He has become sort of a surrogate kid for them, and Mac having the option to hang out with a bunch of cool and bizarre characters is way more appealing than dealing with the overworked mother and bully of a brother. Thankful for Blue being able to live at Foster's, Mac gratefully helps whenever something needs to be taken care of in the home, either assisting in an adoption, rescuing a new friend, or just dealing with a personality crisis. Mac is always there to lend a hand, and he is the best kid an imaginary friend could ask for. Oh, that's really sweet. Then we have Blue Regard Cute Kazoo. Blue is the best imaginary friend ever. When Mac's parents took away his most beloved possession, his blue security blanket, Mac created Blue. Oh, interesting backstory. It could be said that Blue is just that, a walking, talking security blanket. Mac is pretty shy and quiet Mac is a pretty shy and quiet kid when Blue is around. Mac is a pretty shy and quiet kid, but when Blue is around, Mac feels safe, relaxed, and comfortable. But most of all, when Mac's with Blue, he's not lonely anymore because Blue is above and beyond everything. Mac's best friend. They're like two peas in a pod, and rightly so, because Blue is a manifestation of the best but hidden parts of Mac's personality, which is insane because he becomes a complete psychopath by the end of the series, so it feels pretty accurate to me. Where Mac might be shy or timid in a given situation, Blue is bold and confident, often expressing things Mac wishes he could. Kinda makes Blue look like an instigator and a troublemaker. Blue will frequently act out or speak without thinking and get in trouble all the time. But the ever-contentious Mac is always there to get him out of whatever mess Blue has found himself in. Together, they're like a comedy duo. Mac is the straight man and Blue is the goofball. But when we see these two together, one thing is for sure, Mac is the best kid any imaginary friend could ask for. Oh my gosh, I get it, guys. We mentioned this twice already. And it's because of the bond between both of them that Foster's lets Blue stay in the house. How could they ever separate such an inseparable pair? Wilt, having been created as a playmate for a small boy who loves sports, particularly basketball, is the epitome of fun activity. Unfortunately for Wilt, his family moved away, leaving him to fend for himself on the mean streets of the big city. Having lost an arm and sight in one eye, Wilt is no stranger to hard times. But don't feel sorry for him because Wilt is an incredibly positive and optimistic guy. Oh, that's actually really sweet. He knows firsthand how tough life can be for the abandoned imaginary friend, which is why he is eternally grateful for Foster's for taking him in. But this overly positive, everything is great, sunny disposition can also get annoying sometimes. He's very accommodating, almost to a fault, putting all of others' needs above his own to make him a bit of a martyr. He's incredibly self-effacing and constantly apologizes for himself and asks if things are okay. With a big smile, he accepts the fact that no kid is going to want to adopt a broken imaginary friend like himself. Aww. But what he fails to see is that there isn't a kid in the world who wouldn't love to have a friend with a heart as big as Wilt's, which is nice. Then we have Eduardo. Meaning of the name Eduardo is the happy guardian, but perhaps the neurotic guardian in this case. Created by a little boy that grew up in a bad neighborhood, it was Eduardo's job to protect his child from danger. Eventually, the boy grew up and became a big man who could fend for himself, no longer needing Eduardo's protection. Realizing Eduardo's talents shouldn't go to waste, his creator turned him into foster so he could be a guardian for another child. But because he came from such a dangerous environment where trouble loomed every day around the corner, Eduardo developed an almost paranoid sense of doom all the time, which is very interesting. That totally is how he acts. I can't believe how spot on these backstories are. They definitely changed it a little bit when it came to finding Wilt, but in this instance, it's like super close. When he's afraid, watch out because Eduardo explodes into a panic attack of monstrous proportions. Unfortunately, everything makes him nervous. Loud noises, cars, falling leaves, children, especially children. Oh my god, they emphasize children. Whenever he is around a new child, his nerves get the best of him, and he loses it. After the terrified child has run far, far away, Eduardo is left sobbing because he wants nothing more than a new child to protect. Aww. He doesn't mean to scare people away, it's just his fear of rejection makes him so nervous, and that makes him fearful, and when he's afraid, he can't control himself, and then the vicious cycle begins again. Though he might look and act scary, Eduardo is by no means an actual monster. He's actually the sweetest, most sensitive imaginary friend ever. He just happens to be afraid of fear. Then we got Coco. After the accident, she was able to find food, shelter, and all in all, she was okay. But for a little girl trapped in a desert island, it was difficult to fight the loneliness. Solitude does funny things to the brain, and the ideas that sometimes spring forth can be quite interesting. And Coco is very interesting, to say the least. Acting as a companion is the key role for an imaginary friend, and Coco made the little girl's time on the island so much more tolerable. Because she was created by a kid who wasn't in the most clear mental state, Coco is, well, kind of cuckoo. Oh my god, they actually exactly acknowledge it. This is why the rescue team knew that Foster's was the only place for an imaginary friend as special as Coco. More like a pet than a person, she blissfully goes through her day running around the house, laying colorful plastic eggs that contain special surprises, and chanting Coco. You get the sense that Coco is either very, very happy or just insane, but that's okay because Coco lives completely in the moment, and that's more so where her character comes from. She couldn't care less if she's adopted or not. I don't even think she knows what adoption is. Oh, that's so funny they put it in there. But one thing is for sure, if she can make a life on a desolate desert island fun, then she must be onto something, whether she knows it or not. Oh, then we have Madame Foster. As the matriarch of the home, Madame Foster has nothing but pure, unyielding love for imaginary friends everywhere. She's awed by the innocent creativity of children and feels that their ideas should never go disregarded or ignored. All the imaginary friends hold her in the highest regard for giving them a second chance. She's lived in this old Victorian mansion her entire life, and as a child, she had her own imaginary friend, Mr. Harriman. When she was older and had her own family and moved away, she decided to sell the house. But when clearing out the attic for the movers, she rediscovered Mr. Harriman, who was waiting for her all these years. Aww. And so she opened up her heart and her home to the imaginary friends who may have been lost or forgotten. Aw, what a sweet backstory for her. Even though she's incredibly kind and unselfishly caring, she also can be silly and definitely childlike. You might think that old age has caused her to lose her mind, and it has. After years of experience, she realized that adult matters aren't important to her, and she was much happier as a child. So she conveniently and intentionally lost her mind and has been happy ever since. Aw, that's so real. Then we have Mr. Harriman. If it wasn't for Mr. Harriman, Foster's home would never have existed, and you can be sure that this is something Mr. Harriman will never let you forget. For it wasn't Madame Foster's imaginary friend since she was a little girl, it was he who waited for her in the attic after all those years. And it was he who inspired her to seek out other abandoned imaginary friends and give them a second chance. He is an imaginary friend from a bygone era. He's very proper and incredibly well-mannered. With a bit of a stuffed shirt, he expresses little to no emotion, and that sort of behavior is not conductive to a gentleman of his standard. Besides looking after all of Madame Foster's needs, Mr. Harriman oversees the daily operation of the house. This rigid taskmaster expects nothing but perfection from the staff and residents of Foster. He feels that imaginary friends must adhere to a strict set of rules, but he has zero tolerance for when said rules are disobeyed. So all the friends in the house have to be careful that they don't goof around too much or they'll get sent to Mr. Harriman's office. He's kind of like a principal of sorts. Then we have Frankie. What do you feed an imaginary friend? When and where do they sleep? Are they house trained? Do they bite? It's these and a million other stupid questions that Frankie gets hit with every day from families wanting to adopt an imaginary friend. And she's got all the answers, and then some. Frances, don't call her that or she'll deck you. Oh my god, they say that in this. Is Madame Foster's 22-year-old granddaughter, and she is the engine that keeps Foster's running. Cooking, cleaning, crises, not to mention adoptions. They're just some of the daily crap Frankie has to deal with. Oh my god, they say crap in here. Don't get me wrong, Frankie absolutely loves imaginary friends. As a child, she wanted nothing more, but her parents wouldn't let her have one. Now, she has more than she can handle. Kind of like the big sister or a babysitter, she is the prime and only caregiver at the home, and it is her job to make sure all the friends are well taken care of. Though it may sound like fun dealing with hundreds of friends with 1,000 different needs, having a stodgy rabbit tell you how to do your job or a grandma who's not always quite there can sometimes be the furthest thing from making this activity fun. But don't let Frankie's scowl fool you. Deep down, she knows what it's like to be a child without an imaginary friend. And if she can help a kid get something that she was never allowed to have, then she's gonna do darn well at it. Oh my god, that's actually really cool. Then we have Duchess. Oh, I'm not surprised they intended her to be a big main character. Typically, when a child creates an imaginary friend, it's created out of love. And in Duchess's case, things aren't different, except this was created out of money. There are certain rich, stuck-up, snotty kids who create a one-of-a-kind pedigree imaginary friend who have papers, pompous names, and are considered works of art. These friends are sold to none other than rich, stuck-up, snotty kids who are too uncreative and lazy to create a friend of their own. Her Royal Duchess Diamond Persnickety the First, Last, and Only is one of those friends. Oh my god, she has that full name here. The word friend in this case is used loosely. Duchess is more of an investment than a friend. So why would a valuable, one-of-a-kind, so-called work of art end up at Foster's? Simple. Duchess went out of style. Her value dropped, so her family dropped her off at Foster's and went to purchase an even rarer, more valuable friend. She makes life absolutely miserable for everybody in the house. Everybody, including herself. She wishes she was gone, but refuses to be adopted by a family that doesn't meet her objectively high standard. Saying she's high maintenance is putting it lightly. To be honest, Duchess is just a bad idea. Oh my god, Jesus, that's dark. Then we have Terrence. Terrence, with his mother always working late, Mac's 13-year-old brother has declared himself the man of the house, and man, what a pain he is. Rope burns, noogies, and wedgies are some of the fun bonding activities that Terrence and his little brother participate in. If you had the choice of spending your free time with a group of far-out fun figments of imagination, or an even more bizarre creature, the prepubescent, pimply-faced punk who sports a mullet. Oh my god, that's so funny, they put it in here. Which would you choose? I don't blame you, mullets are evil. The characters previously described are by no means the only residents of Foster's. The home is teeming with all sorts of different imaginary friends. These incidental characters go about their day behind the scenes while we focus on the events of our main characters' lives. This will give the world life, texture, and a sense of dimension, and a cast of friends. Now, included in this one is so interesting that they didn't have it in the Camp Lazlo pitch Bible we read, but I like it when they put out their episode premises just to kind of give us an idea of what kind of moments we're expecting to have from the series that's coming up. Like, for example, we have Dinner is Swerved, which already is one of the episodes in the first season. If you can't remember, don't forget I covered every single individual season on this channel for an hour each, and yeah, it's a lot of fun going through it, so please check that out. So Dinner is Swerved is written as such. It's evening at the Fosters, and it's time for Mac to head home, and Blue to head downstairs for dinner. But the pair gets hopelessly lost trying to make their way to the bottom floor from the roof, and down to the dining room. Mr. Harriman has forced all the friends in the house to delay their dining until Blue arrives, so Wilt, Eduardo, and Coco are sent to find their tardy roommates. Somehow Mac and Blue have to make their way through the kooky house before Mac gets in trouble and Blue starves to death. Somehow Wilt, Ed, and Coco have to find their buddies before they starve to death. And somehow Madame Foster and Frankie have to find a way to work around Harriman, his unreasonable rules, before the entire house starves to death. Oh my god, that's so funny. Then we have Adopt Calypse Now. Every Sunday on the front lawn of Foster's, the imaginary friends go outside, hang out, and hope to find a new family at the event called Adopt-a-Thought Saturday. Of course, Blue is not allowed out because he is not up for adoption. But when Mac and Blue realize that those families might adopt all of their other friends, they start to concoct an elaborate plan to sabotage their friends' chances and get their buddies back safe into the house. But with Blue stuck in the house, it's tough for Mac to pull off the schemes without Frankie and Harriman noticing. And when Wilt starts to suspect, Mac and Blue find themselves resorting to desperate measures. And this is good that they incorporated this, because it actually gives you a piece of like how the world's lore works, as well as being like a single episode. Like, I like how much it says about what you're watching. Then we have Store Wars, which is one of the most iconic episodes in season 1, where they're going around the mall the whole time. I don't know why, this one stands out a lot in my head. Everyone's preparing for Madame Foster's big surprise birthday party. Nobody more so than the poor, frazzled, overworked Frankie. When she realizes she forgot streamers, which Mr. Harriman cannot do without, she sets out to the mall with just 30 minutes before the party, and she's just too rushed to argue with Drew when he invites himself. So Mac and the gang go along to get Madame Foster a last-minute gift, which seems like an easy task, but Blue's insistence on finding the perfect gift and the imaginary friend's childlike attention span eventually gets the entire group separated, and Frankie and Mac must comb through the entire mall to find the missing friends, buy the streamers, and get back to the party on time, and the clock is ticking. Oh my gosh, yeah, that is such a good episode, because then we get to see the friends in the outside world, which is just as valuable. Then we have Blue! It's a cold, rainy evening at Foster's. Mac and Blue come in from playing, sniffling and sneezing. As Frankie drives the stuffed-up Mac home, Wilt, Eduardo, and Coco invite Blue for a late-night creature feature. But Blue's not feeling so hot, so he heads to bed. At the end of the movie, Wilt, Ed, and Coco are terrified when they see a pale, moaning-like ghost figure roaming the halls and hear pounding on the doors and windows. They're all sent into a panic. The gang tries to get past their terror and protect the house from their assailants. They have no idea is poor, sick Blue, pale and delirious from a fever, and Frankie, from Max, is terrified having locked herself out on a dark and stormy night. Wow, what a major tone shift, too. It's important that, like, they only incorporated characters and plot lines, unlike, you know, like a map of the house or, like, other things you think you might need. Like, this is very interesting because it gives you more depth in what happens. We also have a description for Busted, the Trouble with Scribbles episode. I just don't want to get into both of them because it's just literally reading descriptions. I mean, I already did that to you guys. Then we actually have a page for relationships, which is super cool. So Mac and Blue, they may seem like a pair of inseparable best friends, but there's a reason they're inseparable. They need each other, and not just for companionship. The two complete each other and compensate for each other's flaws. Blue is brash, impulsive, and innocently self-centered is the ID. Meanwhile, Mac, thoughtful, aware, and logical is the ego. Their relationship is like a system of checks and balances. When Mac is too afraid to try something new, Blue charges in headfirst without a thought. When Mac's getting picked on, Blue fights back with a vengeance. When Mac's nervous, Blue's assuredness helps him calm down. When Mac feels like he's not worthy, Blue feels enough entitlement for both of them. So Blue's confidence and impulsiveness teaches Mac self-worth. But all Blue's positive traits have their bad side. And this is where Mac's sensitivity, which so often becomes a detriment to him, keeps Blue in check. When Blue's being inconsiderate, Mac reminds him to be kind. When Blue impulsively charges into a bad situation, Mac tries to hold him back. When Blue, despite his good intentions, handles a situation selfishly or in poorly thought out manner, Mac steers him onto the right path. Without each other, they would each succumb to their shortcomings, which is so interesting. Then we have Mac, Blue, and the Foster's gang. There's a reason Wilt, Coco, Eduardo have not been adopted. As lovable and fun as they are, they have some personality flaws that keep them from making good companions for a family. If you were to liken them to dogs in an animal shelter, you would say that Eduardo is an enormous guard dog, too timid and fear-aggressive to go home with a family. Coco's a high-strung stray mutt who has never socialized properly and would be too difficult to train to live in a new house with people. And of course, poor Wilt is simply a three-legged dog who is constantly overlooked because of his appearance, despite his gentle and helpful demeanor. Aww. These very flaws are what makes these friends so endearing to Mac. Lucky for them, Mac is sensitive and patient enough to cope with each of their problems. On a typical day when Mac and the gang are faced with a problem, here's what's likely to happen. Mac may be able to come up with a plan, but before he could put it into effect, Blue will dive headfirst without thinking, Eduardo would be too frightened to move forward, so Coco would seemingly go to another world and do her own thing, and these extreme reactions usually make situations worse. Mac's only ally in the logic is Wilt, who is concerned for the well-being of others, that he can't help but cooperate. But oftentimes, Wilt's helpfulness gets in the way too. He can be so willing to sacrifice for others that he deprives himself needlessly, and he can be distracted with any simple task. So Mac expels much brainpower and effort to keep the gang together and focused. Lucky for us, Mac is talented at this and uses his friend's shortcomings to find a solution to the original problem, and more that other problems might arise. And the more problems that might arise. If harnessed correctly, Eduardo's fear and strength is invaluable. Wilt can be made to perform just as any task as somebody needs, and somehow whenever random thing Coco is doing can always come in handy in the end, making Mac wonder if she'd really planned this all along. That's actually a really funny commentary. Blue's role in all this tends to be able to get in the way. He either has a poorly thought out plan on his own, or his eagerness accidentally does things to bring out the worst in the other friends. But he feels like he was a good help when it's all over. He may make certain situations more difficult, but at least he's sure to make them a lot more fun, and funnier. Foster's is a 100% character-driven show. All the stories derive from the personalities of the characters. The only obligation to the concept is that we walk through the front door of the house. Once inside, anything can happen. Foster's has not been designed for a specific age demographic or gender. Like the Muppets or the Peanuts, the show's supposed to be for everybody. Along with Mac, we want the viewers to enter this strange, amazing, and fun world each week. As in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends is a place that you should want to go. From a creative standpoint, everything and anything is possible. You just have to use your imagination. So that's the production Bible for Foster's Home. It was definitely different than a lot of pitch pages I've seen. I feel like it was a lot more text than I'm used to, but at least I found some really cool art online. Is there anything here that's a mystery to you? I know some people said Blue wasn't intended to be such a rude character, but honestly, I'm definitely seeing that when I read this. And the differences that they messed with the origins of, like, Coco, for example, when they changed it for Good Will Hunting, that was surprising too. And they changed the episode orders of the episodes they sampled in the pitch Bible, which is so interesting, especially since they took a whole year to actually delve into this information before they put out the show. But what do you guys think? Do you want me to cover any more shows? Thank you guys so much for watching and have a great day.